Jack Parsons got me on the moon. Jack Parsons got me on the moon.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to, back to, not quite the witching hour with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan, where we attempt to negotiate the slings and arrows of not so outrageous fortune as we seem to be ascending, well, we are, between one yuga, eon, epoch, era, states of being, shift in consciousness, whatever how you're having yourself to the others. Now, the theme of this video tonight is, are men already moving over? Are men already, well, some men, obviously not NPCs and normies, some normies will eventually come, the more sentient ones, but are men who are sensitive, who are interesting, who are intelligent, who are want something more from life, of all ages, not just young guys, older guys, middle-aged guys, are they already moving over? Even young boys might even be moving over before the women. Now, that sounds sexist, but you have to remember that women are under a hell of a lot more social pressures than men usually or generally are when it comes to these kinds of things. Now, let's talk about why I think this. Well, I was been listening around both mainstream and alternative, but a lot of mainstream stuff that since COVID, men have become increasingly dissatisfied with life. Now, not in the same way that many women are, who are hitting the tablets and blaming men and getting more and more woke and more suffering from things like Trump derangement syndrome or lefty. Now, I'm not talking about like the women who would be in like the tribe or the kind of woman who would listen to the show. I'm talking about the average woman who is just going through life doing what society expects from them. Well, many men have already moved on. They're already living in the new era. And the biggest indicator of this would appear to be the hermit. Men are turning into the hermit card in the tarot. That they're no longer interested in the things that men are supposed to be interested in anymore. Now, proviso here, caveat, I was like this since I was a kid. I never liked going to family functions or I like socializing, but only with people who are very, very similar to me. And that's an important point with this video. It's like when I go out to socialize with people who are tribe minded or people who've met me through my work, I often have the best time in the world, and so do they. We all have a great time together. And but if I go out with people who are not, and I know this sounds kind of cultish, but it's just a fact, just how it is with people who would not be of a tribe mind or even being around them. I find they drain my energy, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way too. Is it cultish? I suppose in a way it kind of is, in that we've sort of become a new kind of, you know, social cult, in that some of us now, like many of us were already like this before COVID, but COVID has kind of made men in particular, and women, but mostly men, you know, in a certain age group, say between 20 and 60, to reevaluate their lives. I see it all the time online. A lot of them don't have friends and they're okay with it. A lot of them don't go out anymore and they're okay with it. A lot of them don't have relationships with either a girl or another woman or another man, and they're okay with it. They're perfectly happy if they do have a relationship, being at home with that person, but just as equally happy with a cat or a dog, coming home from work, coming home from the day, and instead of partaking in the social norms, they're very happy to do their hobbies, play a video game, watch films, read a book, do some art, and just basically lock themselves away from the world. And just like I've been saying in all my books, well, particularly my book Sorcery, the first line of defense, of psychic defense in your life, is your front door. That's your first line of psychic defense. And you must turn, if you turn your home, your lair, to use how Anton LaVey put it in the Satanic Bible, you turn your lair into a sacred space for what you want and what you want from life. You see, in normie world, about 10 years ago, they were talking about the man cave. That was probably the beginning of it. That was probably the beginning of it on a kind of a normie level. That certain men were like, I just need some peace, you know. And men are becoming more and more contemplative, and they don't have time. They're becoming very aware of the shortness of life because time definitely does seem to be speeding up at the moment. And they do seem to become aware that every second, every day is precious. Oh my God. Now I know I'm not getting any younger, but I've been like this for a long time. God, even since a teenager, when I was wake up in the morning, I would find I'm going to do what I want to do today. I'm not going to do what someone else wants to do a day. And whenever I tried to fit into normal society, I'm sure many of you men and women feel the same way, you never felt fully comfortable. You might meet one or two people you're comfortable with, but when you try to like play the game, like I was talking the other day about the Irish government, the Parliament being friends, the cast of Friends, when they tried to put you into that Friends type of way of living, you were desperately miserable a lot of the time, unless you were a complete NPC or a complete normie, and you thought that was normal or what was you supposed to do, and you don't think twice about it. So men seem to be. It's now you see the whole thing that I was listening to it on an Irish mainstream radio station, and amazingly they had a good discussion about it, and they kept talking about it as a crisis in manhood. And I was thinking, oh, here they go again. They're going to start talking about what's going on in our trousers and stuff like that. And I wasn't. It was refreshingly a psychologist talking about that men are become like, very solitary. A lot more and more men don't want relationships with women. They're perfectly happy with a dog or a cat, or if they're a single parent with their son or daughter. And if they do have a partner and they're happy with them, they're content with that as well. But if they don't have any of those things, they're not out looking for someone. While the women are complete. Now, now, proviso caveat again. When I say this, I'm talking about normally mainstream women. I'm not talking about you guys out there. Okay, you wouldn't be here if you were one of them. They're already usually generally in relationships. They're not. They're okay. But the normie woman, it seems to be think that the more woke that she gets, the more brainwashed by mass media she gets. I mean, Helen McEntee, the minister for annoying wagons here in Ireland. She's classic of that. The more uh, the more psych meds they take. I'm not saying she's taking psych meds, but the more they go to therapy, they think that it will get them the better life. Men have gone through that stage in the 70s, particularly. You look at the Woody Allen films, there's so much of that, the guy on the couch talking to his analyst, and not, it was a theme for so many men back then as a crisis of manhood was developing. And I saw it in Ireland in the 80s where a lot of young guys just left. They went to England, America, Australia, and unfortunately the women followed them. But a lot of them married American women, English women, Australian women, Canadian women, so on. I didn't get married at all. And so it seems to happen in different social strata and different types of culture. But the thing is, it's really happening now, and it's happening since 2020. Now, this is people would say, was this planned? No, not at all. Not at all. I think that was not what the plan was to get everyone chipped, have passports on them, needlecraft passports, and then from that point on, get them socializing, get them outside, watching them and knowing what they're doing. What they didn't want you inside your sacred and special place where you were kind of the hermit. They didn't want that, but that's what they've got. Like everything else, so many of the things they wanted from that agenda has become inverted for them. This is why they're falling apart because they can't defeat natural law. They can't. So you have men of all ages who are perfectly happy being alone right now, and they're going into deeper places. They're not interested in the news. They're not interested in, like I'll give you an example for it. They may be interested in news when something like the United States elections was happening. All you have to do is look at the amount of activity online before the elections happened. And when the elections were over, there was a very much apparent sea change on social media. Liberal and left-wing sites started losing tens of thousands of male subscribers. They won't tell you it's male, but they are. While the right-wing sites didn't lose the male or female subscribers, but they went inactive. And it wasn't burnout. It was like, job done. We're okay now. Time to build for the future. Time to move forward. Time to get things done. Time to, you know, the work begins now in our own lives. And that's why, the classic hermetic maxim, as above, so below, what Trump and co are doing in government in America, lots of people who are watching that and kind of saying we need this are now doing it in their own lives. Like I'm doing lots of work around this place. I'm saving up some money I'm rewiring and everything. And well, what I can legally do. And doing a few other things, rebuilding walls and stuff. And it's time to plan for the future. Get nose to the grindstone, a hammer to the anvil, anvil of the psyche, and this kind of thing. And instead of them hammering the anvil, we have the hammer in our own hands. And quite often, it's not colossal blows; it's gentle taps on sheet metal to get what we want from life. Now, that's not to say relationships are dying. I'm sure there's lots of people are meeting up and having a great time, but they have to be like people like us. They have to be people like us. Otherwise, the man will eventually get fed up and leave. There's an awful lot of marital breakups right now. It was like COVID. Now, people say, well, COVID got people to the lockdowns and everything, got people to examine their lives, to think differently about themselves, to contemplate. No, most normies and especially NPCs are not capable of that. But people who are capable of it were already on that path anyway. They were already on that road anyway, and they were already going down that road. And so it was an important thing to be given the final nudge. Like when I started doing the Rona Chronicles, I was bewildered, shocked, annoyed, and angry as anyone else. But towards the end, well, not, I'd say about halfway through, I started to realize that this was a chance for us to build our own Viking longship and sail into the West, one by one as individuals. Even though I use the terms like tribes, the Tua, we're a tribe of individuals. There's no rules, there's no rule book. We're sort of like we've come together by just osmosis, by like a feeling we all have. And it's got to the stage now where I can kind of recognize people who might be like us walking down the street. I know that sounds weird, but it's like gaydar. I can see like a people sitting on a train, and there'll be one man or woman who'll be like looking out the train window, and you can see the gears in the brain whirring, but not in a negative way. And I say, oh, that's one of us. That's one of us. And you can see by their body language, how they behave. And if they pick up a magazine to read it or something, it won't be like a tabloid newspaper. Like I'll give you a great example. This is between 2020, around 2000-ish, early 2000s, I was commuting a very long distance by train every morning because I was making really good money. So I was doing very, very long train commutes, 2 hours nearly, and into Dublin. And on the train on the way home, there was be loads of magazines and newspapers left on the tables or on the chairs of the trains. And I would say 90% of them were those stupid, those kind of like take a shit magazines, like Hello, Take a Break, Chit Chat. It's kind of like celebrity people magazine in America kind of thing. Trash, just pure trash. Reality TV magazines. That would be 90% of them. And most of the newspapers would be trap tabloids. The Irish mirror the Irish sun or the Irish star. And you don't see that anymore. Now, if people aren't buying newspapers and magazines as much as they were, but they're going online and things like that. But that was the height of the superficial world. In the years immediately after 9/11, the superficiality was colossal. A lot of it was denial and things like that. But now, and also, like, another thing too was like the obsession with British soccer in this country became rampant then. And now it's like the other way around. A lot of people are going to local Irish matches now and don't bother watching this football on TV, which is fantastic to see. That's like a small microcosm of it. Lots of other things like that. Lots of people are not going on foreign holidays and they're going for hiking in the mountains and things like that, going for long walks. And that's another wonderful thing to see. And so another word I've been using for years, attenuation, a trimming down of the frequencies to what you want and what you require, a reduction, a distillation down to what you want from life. And a lot of men are doing that. A lot of men are doing that more and more. It's growing all the time. And the radio programs I heard on the mainstreams and we're talking about it as if it was a tragic or a worrying trend. And it was usually the women who were worried because you think we were all going to get a man. No, no, sweetheart. If you adapt, you'll get the man. Having Trump derangement syndrome or Conor McGregor derangement syndrome, while you ignore certain demographics who are actually raping women in our society, that's why you're alone, my dear. That's why. Start thinking and stop reacting. And that's and popping all the Xanax and affects her and all the other ones won't get you to change. Change begins within, as the Buddhists say. That's a big, huge part of it. Wow, that's a massive part of it. Where they actually have. Oh no, of course, don't say I'm sexist. I'm talking about the normie women, the majority of them. The majority of the normie men, if they're not complete airheads, they're becoming gay. I mean, it's not. I think a lot of that's a lot of the trans thing as well. It's boredom. It's a kind of a again back to the first one of the first videos I made in this show. Decadence, decadence and boredom go hand in hand. Comfort, and that's why you get huge numbers of transitioning among the upper middle class people whose children are civil servants or civil servants themselves and have jobs for lives and don't have to worry about anything. And then it's almost non-existent among the working class. It's not because the working class are bigots or animals or gammons, they're scum. It's because they enjoy a richness of life you don't. Simple as that. All your upper middle class trappings and all that like superficial stuff you wanted, it hasn't given you shit. And now you're chopping your bollocks off. Imagine that. That'd be a good blues song, wouldn't it? Yeah, all your money, it hasn't made you good. And now you're chopping your bollocks off. And your woman, she ain't good. You know, that's blues music today. And this crisis, which is not, it's actually a beautiful thing, are the right kind of men doing what's right for them. That's a beautiful thing. That's not selfish. That's not being antisocial. That's not isolationist. Another word of the hour. That's not being selfish. It's self-care. It's self-care. Obligatory H.P. Lovecraft citation. One of the things about H.P. Lovecraft is that he was always just cited as being a loner and an oddball and a loser on his own. But he tried marriage, and it was a fairly good marriage with Sonia Green. And he just didn't like New York, and it wasn't working out for him the kind of life she wanted and the kind of life he wanted. And so they went their separate ways in not a very healthy manner. But he was one of those men, he back in the day, who said, like, I'm better off living alone and doing my work. And I'm not lonely. You see, being alone and lonely are not the same things. You could have hundreds of friends and be the loneliest person in the world. You could be out every night of the week socializing and be the loneliest person in the world. Or you could be the hermit, the solitary man or woman, and you are the happiest person in the world. Well, as happy as you can be. The most contented way. Contented is a better word than happy, because being happy all the time really comes out of psychiatry. It really comes out of things like psychiatry. Being happy all the time. Being contented is where you should really be. Contented means you'll have your up and downs in life, but you're generally moving in the right way, and you found a trajectory, a groove in life that that's working for you now. And that's, you realize that you have to make the most of every single day and not follow along with the crowd. So contentment, psychiatry is all about making you happy. You're not supposed to be happy all the time. That's why, they don't call it the blues for nothing, because you pull yourself up when you're at your lowest point. That's what the great legacy of the kind of African American blues music culture was to the world, was like, I'm at rock bottom, but I'm going to pull myself up, and this is the whole thing of lifting yourself up, pulling yourself up, and in a real way, not going, I'm number one. I'm going to make it to the top. That kind of shit that came out in the 70s and 80s, No, it's not like that. It's like, things are shit, but they I better find a way out. That kind of thing. Like country and western songs. The ones that, like, yeah, yeah, things are bad. It's time to move on. And you can do that at any age now. This is the beauty, because the world we live in, it's easier for men and women to be independent and on their own. And you have this whole thing over the prices of property and houses and so on. You could live in a shack, man. You know, you could find the cheapest place and live a cheap, frugal life. Believe me, you'll be much happier than paying a mortgage and trying to play the suburban game. I mean, there are people with money who can do that, but for many, it's very hard. Uh, and like I said, there's nothing wrong with finding someone and being happy. It's wonderful, good for you. But if you, it's not that world anymore, really. It's a solitary hermetic world, and it's increasingly that way. Society is despicable. I mean, most people out there today are absolute animals. Now, I know that's very hard for you Christians to hear that, but it's true. Many humans out there are just the scum of the earth. And am I being chauvinistic and judgmental? Yeah, yeah, I am. They're draining bastards. They will, if they can't find a way to directly drain you, because energy is becoming more limited for the normies. Now, this is an important point, guys. Energy is ultimately in things like charisma and stuff like that. When you're producing your own energy, you're charismatic. When you're producing more energy than you need, you're charismatic. Whether you be a musician, or just an ordinary fella down the pub, or someone who's in play sport, or someone you just know at work. You just like, I like hanging around with her. I like hanging around with him. They make me feel better. I enjoy the experience of being in their company. They're charismatic. They're generating, even if they can be talking about very serious things and they keep you locked in, but not in a doom kind of way. You can say, yeah, that's very interesting. I am into that. Yeah. Alan Watt, God rest his soul, was kind of one of them. He had that kind of Scottish, like, oh, it's not, all this, the New World Order and all this stuff. But he was very charismatic as well, and it was a kind of like a bread and butter charisma. I wouldn't say dark, but it got you thinking, it got you working, that kind of thing. And then there's other people who are very bouncy and fun and like, yeah, yeah, and they fuck all charisma, none, zero. I mean, the classic of that would be Kalamata Harris. There's zero charisma there. It was sucking it, and this is all ultimately the energy in the central nervous system. Now, those of us who are trying to take care of our energy, who are stewarding our energy, and especially at this time, uh, we realize that the average normal person going to the supermarket, going out with your friends that you used to be friends with, you don't care about anymore. They don't interest you anymore. It's sucking energy from you, and if you're out with them going, I wish I was at home building, an Airfix model kit, or playing a video game, or watching a DVD box set. Yeah, that's where you should be, at home doing those things. You should be doing those things. And I mean, I have thousands of books, thousands of this place is literally built on books. Every wall is full of them, and I've got that. As long as I have a pair of glasses, I'm good. I'm good forever, you know. And why do you want anything else, you know? And of course, you want affection and you want love, but you can find that. You can find that. If you look for it, you'll find it. And I think the things of ownership are gone. The concept of owning someone. I think people who are hung up on the need to own people, you know, there's doomed as the ones who are. It's got to be perfect. You know, perfection doesn't exist in an imperfect, being such as man. And see, you better learn to either work with people's kinks and their idiosyncratic behavior, which in many cases what they call idiosyncratic is actually their normal behavior, and deal with it. Now, normies are also extremely dangerous right now in NPCs. They're COVID. The whole thing with COVID. We saw these animals for what they are, and they are animals. I don't consider. No, sorry, Christians. You talk about everyone having a soul and everyone being redeemed. You're wrong. You're just fucking wrong. You're just wrong. And I'm sure if you studied like Christian mysticism, which is an interesting topic, you would find that somewhere in there they'll probably say something similar. I mean, probably quotes attributed to Jesus Christ or whatever that say something like that. But it's nonsense of like, they're all wonderful and they can all be saved. That's the biggest pile of shit, that is. Total pile of shit. And many of them don't have souls. If that's not apparent to you by now, it never will be. And like I always said, you know, before COVID, we said who would actually call the Gestapo on a young child like Han Frank? And after COVID, we're like, all 90% of the motherfuckers around me. That's what we learned. That's what we learned. And you're gonna spend what precious time you have on this earth indulging those types, catering to those types, giving in to those types, trying to satisfy those types, psychotically trying to believe that they can be saved, that you can do something to make them wake up. No, your job is to put a bigger barrier between you and them as possible. Just like all these men are doing, all these problematic men are doing. I love that word problematic, that started to emerge back around 2000 and 2000 and I don't know, 14, 15. I remember it started with the gaming community in Dungeons and Dragons. That's why I got out of all that stuff. I got all of that stuff, like social wise and online, because Wizards of the Coast, I think it was, who are basically the overbody for lots of games like Dungeons and Dragons and Hero Quest and other games, started to say that the rule books that they inherited had been problematic, and that like evil races were all generally referred to as being darker and this kind of thing, which is but they weren't humans, you idiots. They were monsters. Orcs are not humans, and this kind of thing. They're not you. They're monsters. They're not human. And I still enjoy reading these books as fiction. I mean, I get the rules books and I read them as fiction. And these books, rule books, started to be changed. And there was a split in the gaming community between, say, 80% thought it was a great idea because they're all fucking idiots, and 20% was going like, but this is real life. This is real life. And besides, orcs are not human beings. They're not brown or black skinned people or races like they're different races. They're different, not race, different, they're different species, So I would suddenly say that animals like black panthers are no longer dangers or black cobras and stuff. It was ridiculous. It was absolute, or, piranhas because they're dark colored. And so that was when, and they started talking about problematic. And I remember it's around the same time they were saying that like Lovecraft was problematic. well, because like things like well, he wrote very racist letters when he was younger, but when he was older, he said he was a fool for writing those things, and that's always taken out. But he didn't like being around people who were nun wasps. And I was told, oh, you can't like Lovecraft because he hated the Irish. And I was like, I started to read into this. No, he didn't. The Irish Times literally tried to implement a boycott on H.P. Lovecraft's books in Ireland because he didn't like the Irish. No, he didn't like Sinn Féin. And, he didn't like, he believed that Ireland was part of the UK and it should have never left. He was a Tory, and even about his life said he was an awful Tory. He said he regrets that. And he said that like many of the characters, the Irish characters in his novels, like Thomas Malone and the Horror at Red Hook, are treated with great sympathy and dignity. This kind of thing. It was not. It wasn't like that at all. And so, but they just tried to make out that he hated the Irish. He didn't, and even if he did, it still would stop me from reading his books. I don't care. And that's the thing with the Irish, I don't like either. And so it was all creeping what films you could watch or books you could read, and it was all leading up towards COVID, what was problematic and what wasn't. Like I can remember one time on some group, people posted pictures of a swastika that was on a temple in India, and there was actually idiots, actually woke idiots. And when I went onto their pages, a lot of them were civil servants or work for the government, who were saying things like, "It doesn't matter, it's still Nazi." Like as if they even ancient swastikas that were symbol of the sun on cave art, they were put in there by Nazis. This is how bad it got. See, they were priming these motherfuckers, getting them ready for COVID. They were working on them and building them up. So that was everything was the problem. Certain songs were problematic, certain books were problematic, and it was a way of doing a de facto banning, a de facto banning. And it didn't really work, to be honest with you. It kind of failed miserably, and I think it didn't do anything. Now in the gaming community, it did, and things like Dungeons and Dragons. Now they're trying to actually remove the original uh, the original books because they're problematic, and I even think Elon Musk has given Wizards of the Coast the hard time, and so on, and over this. But now men have become problematic. Now we always knew that, like white men and all this, Black Lives Matter. They tried to make out that like only Black Lives Matter and no one else does, and that was terrible. That was an awful thing. That all lives matter. End of. End of. That's it. And I don't know many black people who actually signed up to Black Lives Matter. It was all like upper middle class whites or stupid college students and things like that who were thick. And so men are now problematic, but they're problematic because they're walking away. You see, the reason why all that stuff was problematic, like from the books and movies and songs and music, was because it didn't meet in with the Great Reset. It didn't match in with the Build Back Better. It didn't meet that because it created independent of thought, and it broke the Borg mold of the globalists. Now they're really worried about men who don't want to be part of their game. And so now men, just by their biological sex in the West, are now being declared problematic. And my attitude is, brothers, be as problematic as you can possibly be. And you keep following that path because I got written news for you. You're on the hermit's journey because not only are you meant to be on it, but you need to be on it. So I'll see you next time. Sanguine knows and feck him if they can't take a joke.